That's very, very true. At the same time, I do think there are times when an author, the very beginning of a story, and I see this a lot because I do give a lot of feedback to other authors, where your first few pages or your first paragraph in a short piece is you feeling your way around. And often as not, that chunk maybe needs to be tossed away and use that next paragraph. Or you take something from the middle and stick it up there. And I am debating whether I should make a second edition of May and Ted and slap a little bit of the middle in the beginning just to give people a taste of what's to come. Or even a little prologue or something. It's just, yeah. So I can see where, the feedback was a little bit rough for me, but at the same time, it's always a learning experience to know what your readers are saying or feeling.
Okay, everybody, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have a fellow Canadian on the podcast with me today. I'm so happy and excited. Jan is here with me today. We're going to be talking about Jan's writings, all the great stuff going on. And I'm always happy to have a fellow Canadian, hand on the heart, joining me on the podcast. Jan, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
So at some point during this podcast, being Canadians, I'm sure the word sorry is going to come up. Maybe Tim Hortons, maybe maple syrup. What else could come up? The Mounties? I don't know. Something Canadian will happen during this episode, yes. Right?
I assume so. I will mention Vancouver and UBC, so there's Canadian pieces.
Okay, so I have a Vancouver story. Can I share it with you?
Absolutely.
So I used to work for a large pet retailer that's from America, but they have Canadian stores. I'll leave it at that. And they flew me to Vancouver for one day. I landed in Vancouver at like 2 p.m. And then I worked all night at a store that was going through a change. And then I got back on the plane at 10 a.m. the next day and flew home. So I was there for like a short amount of time. But in that small amount of time, I had the chance to meet a fellow coworker. We got in our car rental and we went up Highway 1 and we went all the way to Squamish. And we had the best barbecue restaurant I ever had in the past in Squamish, which felt like a movie set. Just standing there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's so good. So there you go. That's my little Vancouver story.
Squamish is a movie set. It's, there's a romance comedy TV series that's filmed there, Blue River. And it's supposed to be out of California, but it's filmed in Squamish.
What?
That's called Blue River.
Oh, I'm writing it down now because I'm going to have to go watch and look at it again.
And then, I grew up in Horseshoe Bay. So just as the highway starts to veer up the coast and away from civilization, that's where I was a child. So nice. I could be on the West Coast, which is beautiful.
Okay, so for those who are listening from around the world, because we have listeners in India and Africa and all over the place, can you tell me and tell our listeners what you love so much about Vancouver, Canada?
Well, the weather and the flowers and the green. Because I'm speaking to you from Edmonton, Alberta, which is prairie mostly and serious winter. Whereas in BC, I think Vancouver is one of the few places that gets all 4 seasons. I know you're on the East Coast in Ontario, and you get 4 seasons as well. Oh, yeah. But us in Alberta, we have these 4 months they call construction season, and then have winter, right? So. That's part of it. The sound of the ocean and the smell of the ocean. Just, I get when I drive through BC and get to sea level, my soul wakes up and goes, hello.
Oh, I love that. What a picture. What a picture. So great. And so we're connecting today on Living the Next Chapter to talk about your author journey and a little bit about you and what you're writing. Can you tell us a little bit about how this all started for you and becoming an author? I'm always curious to find out what that starting point was that kind of said, I'm going to go from not being an author to becoming an author. Take us back to that moment. I'd like to know more about that.
Well, I mean, I think you'll hear a lot of authors saying, "Oh, I started writing when I was as soon as I could make words on paper," right? And that's pretty much when I wrote my first story. And I wrote for a long time. I started doing freelance writing when I was raising my kids. So, just articles for newspapers and things like that. And then, I decided to get a degree in creative writing and journalism. I was in my 40s when I did that. And I did a degree in my 20s. It was cellular molecular microbial biology, so heavy science. And that was sort of what I call my father's degree, because he wanted me to be a scientist. And so when I did my degree in creative writing, came to me so naturally. And I was so thrilled, that I got to spend my time writing, right? So I was always on the dean's list, and I received the Barry Broadfoot Award for creative nonfiction for a story I wrote about my father's passing. And so that was a boost of confidence. And then I worked as a reporter for a few years, and then I became a corporate writer. And which made it very difficult. I was writing for the government, so it made it very difficult for me to find that creative piece of myself. Right. So I really, I kept calling myself a writer, but I thought I always put that caveat, "Oh, I'm a corporate writer," which means I write, brochures and safety bulletins and really boring stuff. And so I started to say, you know what? I have to start writing. If I'm going to be a writer, I'd better get that novel written before, I kick the bucket. So I started getting up at like 5:30 every morning. On the weekdays, I don't write on weekends. And I wrote for half an hour every day. And it took me 5 years to get my first novel.
Wow.
And I've retired since then. And you know what? I still write half an hour every day. I wish I could remember the name of the author. She is a Canadian author as well. And she said, I write half hour every day. On the days when I'm writing really hard, I write half hour every day. And even when I'm not writing, I'll write half hour every day. Because some people are able to sit down and write a novel in one sitting, and I'm just not that person, I bet. So
have you ever had an opportunity where you sat down to write in the morning and you just stare at a blank piece of paper and you're like, I'm not feeling it. I don't have it, but I feel disciplined to do this. Like, how do you push through those times?
So many days are like that. I think any author will tell you most of our time is spent making ourselves right. I think one of the things I have to do is stop thinking about my audience. When you're writing your raw copy, your very first draft of a story, it's really about telling yourself the story before you start telling it to the audience. So you have to get the story out. And with that, I do what I call free fall. So I just start writing. It can be anything, any word. Some people use something called morning pages, which is an artist technique where you write 3 pages of whatever comes into your head. I have to do laundry this afternoon, and look at, I feel like cheese. Completely random sentences. And I use that sometimes. I'll go for a few weeks where I write my 3 pages of morning pages. Right now, we've had a very busy life with grandchildren and all the other things. So I'm just happy to squeeze in my daily writing. And I think that's been a real key for me, is to start writing for myself. And I can edit it later for all those other people.
See, so I'm at this point, I'm not an author, so I admire everything that you're doing, and I'm a musician. So when I sit down to write music, there's times where I have the same experience writing music that you would experience writing a book. But then I'm like, I would go and listen to another artist and be inspired by their music and then I'd find myself just playing their music. And I'm like, now that's not my song. That's their song. I'm inspired by them, but now it's starting to work its way into my thoughts, into my planning when I write. And I'm always afraid that I'm copying someone else and my idea is not uniquely mine. And I know that there's not a lot of original writings and music and writing books because a lot of things have already been written or recorded. How do you separate yourself from authors that you admire without letting them kind of bleed their way into your book and you feel like you're just saying their words? Is there a way that you kind of keep that separate?
I do. And it's funny you should say that, because I find that I write pretty much literary fiction. You know, it's a suspense thriller kind of. I like nasty things to happen to my characters, but I cannot read sci-fi or fantasy when I'm writing my stuff, because it's really hard to take my brain from that sci-fi fantasy world into a reality-based story that, you know, is not got any aliens or weird magical things happening. So,
right.
A couple of my favorite authors, Margaret Atwood and John Irving, are kind of my inspiration, and they're my go-to to make my brain go into that sort of creative mode. That they write the same style as me, but I don't feel like I'm ever copying them.
Good.
Because I could never go, like both of them have their weird, which I love. You know, there's this, when you're reading their stuff that sort of cracks the brain. And I like to write like that, but I have a different way of cracking people's brains, I suppose, if that's a term.
Okay. I always like to wonder too, like how much of you are in your writings? Do you find yourself as kind of blending you as a person into your characters, your little elements of who you are kind of planted within your writings, or are you trying to keep you separate from your characters when you're writing?
I don't think you can keep yourself separate from your characters, because you are the one character you know inside out. You know how you think, and thought patterns. You know how you physically move and what it feels like maybe to be scared. I mean, when I'm writing about those feelings, I have to write how I felt them, because I don't know how other people have felt them really. But I've been so many different people in my life. So I'm able to choose those different people and insert little experiences. Like, my goodness, I've worked in a pet store. I have been a scientist. I have been a reporter. I worked in a radioactive lab. I studied viruses. I've been a student. You know, there's so many parts of me that I can throw into my stories. But I watch people and I know people. So little bits of what I know about people or what I see in people really get put into my story too. And I'm 60. I know a lot of people, or have met a lot of people. And so those little quirks, you know, that's interesting. You know, that's probably something that's going to tuck away in my brain, the way that person stuffed that French fry in their nose or whatever. Whatever odd things. And I've raised children as well, so you know them as well. So,
any tips for new authors listening to us talk today about building character development in your writing? How do you take somebody from a character from being an idea to making them feel like a real person that a reader can identify with?
I think you have to, again, use parts of yourself and parts of the people that you've met. But I found when I'm writing, my characters become themselves. And I always go back to when I was a little girl playing with Barbies or whatever, you know, like that kind of level of, this is what you use your imagination, and you take pieces of people that you've seen or know and you throw those bits in. But I mean, even the story I'm writing right now, the characters are evolving. And I work with a critiquing group and they go, well, that character wouldn't have done that earlier in the story, but now we're seeing this new part of the character. And because I've written, about 100 pages into this novel, this character has changed who they are because as I get to know them and what they do and how they react to things. And I'm going to have to go back to the beginning of the book and tweak those bits of that personality that has developed. So, you write your character and your character grows into something. And then it's all part of the editing process and the building of the novel that you can take it back and go, okay, with my novel here, May and Ted, May and Ted were completely different people when I first started writing about them.
Right.
And now they're, now they're people in the stories.
It seems interesting because it seems like when I talk to authors, there's a moment where the author is driving the story. They're in control. They're behind the wheel and we're going in this direction. But then there seems to be some times where the author seems to move to the passenger seat and the story takes over. And it's like, I wasn't intending to go left. The story's going more right. And now here we're going in a new direction that I wasn't even planning. And it's almost like it's like enjoyable for the author to move from driving to passenger and see where the story goes. I like that.
It's really freeing. And I remember, in my 30s when I really started trying to write fiction, I would find that my characters kept going crazy and doing horrible things. And so I would stop writing because I thought, people don't want to know about that. But now I've given myself permission to let my characters do whatever they want. And yes, they take the driver's seat. And if they go crazy, well, we'll deal with that.
Okay, so let's talk about your book. Let's talk about, you have it there with you. Let's see it. I love when authors hold up their books.
Yeah.
May and Ted. Okay. Tell me the story behind the idea for May and Ted. Where did the idea come from at the start?
Oh, goodness. The idea was, Jan, you have to write a novel before you turn 60. And then I started writing about a boy and a girl who are almost Bonnie and Clyde like in their behaviors, and they get together and they're both psycho. And they start doing horrible things to people together. This was their idea of a good time, and it got very dark, and I finished writing that, and that was my first draft. And then I start to rewrite it, and it became, let's start with a little boy. Let's see who this guy is. Like, why did he become crazy? And, the little boy, Ted, turns out he's not so crazy. It's only May. So, the idea for the book just came to itself. It really did. And, you talk about writing and seeing a blank page. One of the things about May and Ted is it's told in Ted's story, his perspective and his voice, and then it's told in May's voice. And so, I could have mood swings where I could be Ted and write Ted's version of the story one day, and then I could turn around and write May's version of the story the next day. But, it just came to me. I wish I could say that I had an idea or a story all laid out, and I know a lot of people do. They're writing that story because it's been in their head for years and years, but May and Ted just came out and became the story it is.
So before we hit record, you were talking about meeting some fellow authors or readers in a public setting and talking and getting feedback about your book. And you got some feedback on your book that kind of made you pause for a second because they were they weren't giving glowing reviews. They had some criticism and some critique of your work, especially in the early part of May and Ted. And can you tell us a little bit about that and your response to that internally, to that feedback that you received?
Internally, it made me think that May and Ted is self-published, and I was rejected probably 30 times before I self-published. So it made me think that I shouldn't have been submitting the first 100 pages to an agent. I should have given them the middle. It also made me think, well, maybe I should rethink how the book is laid out. I didn't feel bad because I've had a lot of really great feedback on it. I have had criticisms, and I never had a bad written review on Amazon for May and Ted, but or on Goodreads, but I have had bad scores, like 1 or 2 out of 5. That destroys me for a day. Like, yeah. I wondered, I really just wish I could talk to the person and find out what they found that turned them off, right?
Yeah.
To give me such a bad review that, I mean, I'm glad they don't write any words about it publicly, but I do wish they would give me a call and tell me what was wrong with the book.
But the specific feedback that you had was more about, I guess, the character development and the story in the first few chapters being more of like childlike, and the person wasn't really connecting with the story at the beginning, thinking maybe I'll put it away. But as the book progressed, you hook them in. But you did that on purpose, though, right? You purposely did that. Did. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, because May and Ted start off as children. They're in grade 2 and then grade 3, and it shows little bits of May that let you know that she's not your average bear. And it also lets you know that, Ted is this sweet little boy. And all he wants is, to make May happy. And, she does some pretty creepy little things. But you also see where May's coming from. So then the next section goes into their high school years, and then things start to, get a little more interesting. And yes, people get grabbed pretty quick there when they see who May has become as a teenager.
So that's what I love, is when we can hear in the voice of the author saying to the reader, listen, I know that the beginning is the way it is in the book, but that's there for a reason. And you will understand as you go. So don't stop reading, keep going, right? And if you feel like you're not connecting with the characters, I'm building a world for you that you're going to understand, and the book will make more sense with it included than if I excluded it, right? There's a reason it's there.
Well, that's very, very true. At the same time, I do think there are times when an author, the very beginning of a story, and I see this a lot because I do give a lot of feedback to other authors, where your first few pages or your first paragraph in a short piece is you feeling your way around. And often as not, that chunk maybe needs to be tossed away and use that next paragraph. Or you take something from the middle and stick it up there. And I am debating whether I should make a second edition of May and Ted and slap a little bit of the middle in the beginning just to give people a taste of what's to come.
Interesting.
So, or even a little prologue or something. It's just, So I can see where, the feedback was a little bit rough for me, but at the same time, it's always a learning experience to know what your readers are saying or feeling. Other people, when I first started getting May and Ted, putting it through my critiquing group, they love the children. And,
right.
Yeah. They were just, oh my gosh, you've nailed this little boy. So, little girl.
Nice. So you said you had some portions to share with us from the book. I would love to hear a little bit. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. So
Awesome.
I skipped the boring part with the kids.
Oh, no. That's necessary. That has to be there.
So, I guess a little bit of background at this point. They're in Vancouver. The story starts actually in the States as children, but Ted and his boyfriend David moved to Vancouver, and May has found them there. So May's obsessed with Ted, as anybody who's read the back of the book knows. And so she is waiting in the back alley outside their apartment for Ted and David to do whatever so she can follow them. Mm. And there we go. It's just 4 pages. Hopefully that's going to be enough. Okay. All right. So this is May. My brain is wrapped in razor blades and rubber bands, and all the windows are steamed up like a bad dream. It's daylight. I'm shivering. Wiping off the windshield with the sleeve of my shirt, I see the little turquoise Civic motoring down the alley. I start the car, slam it into drive, and accelerate to catch up. They don't know this car. I should keep it that way. What's left of the 26 of Jack rolls out from under the seat. My stomach rolls with it. Creeping the car out of the alley just enough to see them turn left toward the freeway. I reach for the bottle and chug down the last quarter. At least it's cold. They're headed into the city. I catch up at Brunette and slip in their lane a couple of cars back. The shivers fade as the alcohol and the car heater kick in, and my shoulders start to relax. I grope for my sunglasses on the dashboard. The mountains scream white, black, and mist against the spring blue sky. I hope we're not going for a run. Ted. I told David Tippy would be here, so I wouldn't be alone. But Tippy doesn't actually come in on Saturdays until around 1 o'clock, so I have 2 hours alone. He's going to the lab, by the way. I love the lab when it's empty. The silence, the sticky sound of sneakers on tile floors, the succinct click of a cupboard door, the dry and true clink of glass flasks when you take them out of the autoclave tray. But nothing beats the fine young cannibals when you've got a tedious job to do. I pop in a cassette and blast the tunes. I get the fume hood set up, lay out the vials, and get the 18% culture from the incubator. Then, snapping on a double layer of latex gloves. Then I head down the hall with the key to the locked fridge where the dimethylmercury is stored. She drives me crazy, follows me down the corridor. I get a little boogie in my walk, chiming in with the chorus. May. Campus is empty. I've actually had to park on the other side of the lot to be discreet. I'm using my binoculars to watch, and oh my God, you'd think they were never going to see each other again. I can see their faces pressed against each other. They've been in the car for like 5 minutes. David is so clean. He must know he's a second choice. Finally, Ted gets out of the car, and David drives away. It looks like I finally get him to myself, my sweet boy. I rest my head against the car window as I watch him go into the life sciences building. It makes my heart ache to see him walk away from me all the time. He never looks back anymore. I wait. The little buzz I got from the jack is fading back into a hangover. My stomach churns. Digging through the pile of crap on the passenger seat, I find a bag of Twizzlers and stuff a whole licorice in my mouth. It's cold and hard, and I think I'm going to choke, but the gag feels good. It brings tears to my eyes, and I know what I have to do. Today is the day we make it happen. I reach under the dashboard and wrap my hand around the cold metal piece tucked in the ledge. I've started to carry it with me. There's just too many creepy Johns. I realized the gun wasn't keeping anyone safe stuffed under my mattress. I wonder if he's going to fight me. Chewing the licorice soft, I rub the barrel against my cheek. Its smooth chill soothes the pain in my head. Sex would be good right now. Maybe we can do it in the lab. I smile, shoving the gun down the front of my pants. And I work going through the motions. Pipette a sample into a vial, pop the lid down, spin the vial, pop the lid up, pipette a sample out, and squirt it into the next dilution. The little brown bottle of dimethyl mercury is parked safely at the back of the fume hood. My breath is moist against the face mask. The fume hood roars its own storm, so I've turned the music up. I can't resist bopping to the incessant funk of I'm Not the Man I Used to Be as it rocks to its conclusion. The music fades to a close, and there's a click. My instant thought is that the tape has ended, but then the tin beat of I'm Not Satisfied begins. She's here. That's where I'll leave you.
Good job. Good hook. I love it. Wow. I love how you describe things. Like I'm in the car. I can see the mess on the front seat. I can see the bag of licorice. The steam on the face mask in the lab. You took me there. Like I was
awesome.
there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you. She's, there's, I think a technique that in description that I use that I really encourage any authors I work with to use as well is use good words. They don't have to be big and fancy. Just use the words as you would describe something to a child. You can just keep it simple, but be there, and write those words that you see. You don't have to be a thesaurus or screaming detail.
Right.
And I think that's something that's unique to my writing, or something that I hope other writers incorporate in their work as well.
Awesome. So we're going to have links in the show notes to buy this book, and I would encourage everyone to go and support Jan in this book. It sounds amazing. Well done, by the way. Have you ever put thought into doing an audio version?
I have, actually. I think that would be, I love nothing better than listening to an audiobook when I'm on a long road trip. So, I have thought about it, and I think it would be really interesting. I'd love to have like a man and a woman reading the separate parts and that. So yeah, it's the thing that I'm interested in. Yeah. I just don't, I haven't really done any research on how to do it yet. So.
There you go. I've had a few voiceover actors come on who do work for Audible and stuff. And it's amazing to hear what they do. It's really cool. But the one thing I do love though, is I love hearing it in your voice for the reason that you know where to put the pauses. You know what to accent. You are in the story. So I might go back to the beginning of our episode. I talked a little bit about putting yourself into the story. Your science background comes out here with Ted, right? I'm like, that is so cool. That's you. You're in the story because you know all these things, and you can tell that it's coming out from you. And so I love, that's exactly what I was asking that question. And I'm so glad you read that because I saw you in that book as well. It's
opportunities, things you've done in your life. Why not put them into your story, right? Because you know what they are.
Great tip. Great tip for everyone listening. Do exactly what Jan just did. That was so cool. I love it. Okay, Jan, talk to us about what's coming for you. What are you working on? Give us a sneak peek because I know there's going to be people wanting more.
Okay,
Jan.
Well, first off, I've submitted a couple of short stories. I have one that's problem with my writing is I can't figure out what genre I am writing. I have been promoting May and Ted as a suspense, literary suspense, a thriller, but the book club I talked to said, well, it's definitely just literary. So anyway, but, so I do have a little short story that I've sent off for, review at a literary magazine. So I'm hoping that'll, come to something. If not, I will probably be publishing it on my website, jdrobertsonbooks.com. And then I'm working on a novel right now. I'm quite excited about the challenge I've put on. myself doing this. And something with May and Ted was I set these parameters and it made them more fun to write. Like I said, the story is only told through May's eyes and Ted's eyes. So nobody else's perspective of what's going on is ever shown because you can't read people's minds. And so in this next story I'm doing, it is about a girl named Mary, and she is a teenager and she gets kicked out of the house. And her mom is quite horrible. And she ends up at this guy's house, boyfriend's. And there's another guy who's interested in her, blah, blah, blah. But the story itself is told only from people who are involved in the story. It's never told through Mary's eyes. So it's quite a challenge that way. And it's also a challenge because the two main characters are not Mary or these boys. They are a guy who I call the rapist. And he was a rapist. He raped somebody. I can't say he was a rapist because I think, once you've done that, that's what you are. But he really regrets what he did. And he is doing everything to try not to do it again. He's never been caught. And then an elderly lady, and she's very sweet, and she loves everyone. And these two, the rapist and the old lady, they befriend each other. And she inadvertently, she doesn't realize it, but she helps him turn around. But at the end, I can't tell you what.
Yeah, don't tell us that. Yeah.
So, that's my big challenging one.
Buy the book when it's out. Yes.
I don't know if you're planning on mentioning, but I do have a couple of book signings coming up in Edmonton. One in St. Albert's this Saturday at Chapters, and one at the Chapters in South Edmonton Common on Easter Sunday. Now that one, I don't know if he realized it was Easter Sunday we scheduled it, so I would check my Facebook and on that one, and I'll be promoting it if it's happening. I also have a book promotion going on for Amazon through Amazon Canada, US, and UK, with 99 cents for the ebook. So, yeah.
Nice.
And that goes on until April 4th. It starts tomorrow.
Awesome. Jan, before we go, how would you like to inspire an author who's starting out early in their writing career? They're coming here, they love what you do, they're a big fan of your work. What would you say to them as a new author to encourage them to get going? You've talked about writing every day. I love your 30 minutes a day. That's great. What else can we do to inspire them to
what I
writing?
did was, even just recently, I took a novel writing course. Meet other writers, get feedback on your work, and it will always be good feedback. And it'll also help you learn where you're weak, and it also gives you other writers to inspire you. I have been in Edmonton for 10 years, and I did have a critiquing group, and it fell apart recently, like 3 years ago anyhow. And so I felt really at a loss. And so I joined this novel writing course in January, and I met some of the most talented writers I've ever worked with. And we have formed a course or a group now, and we meet every other week with our work, read to each other, and give each other feedback. And don't be afraid of feedback. It's always valuable. You don't always have to take it either. Like, a lot of people give me feedback and I go, well, you're an idiot.
Right. Yeah, you're just not my audience. Properly. I understand that. Yeah.
But I also encourage people to read their work out loud to hear what it actually sounds like. And if you ever go to self-publish, make sure you've got a professional, qualified editor to look at your work. Don't be slapping it out just willy-nilly thinking you caught all the typos.
Yeah. It's good. It's awesome because it's an outside set of eyes, different perspective. They're not so close to the trees. They can't see the forest, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that outside opinion. That's great advice.
Good.
Right. Yeah. Get somebody who knows what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a key, right? Awesome, Jan. Thank you so much for sharing part of the book. I don't have that happen often, and I wish I had more authors do that because, again, I get to hear the book through your lens, in your voice, and that was a treat to have that, by the way. Thank you for doing that. Very unique as a guest. And this is your first time on a podcast, and I want to give you some quick advice. You are amazing at this. Please do more of this because hearing the author on a podcast takes away some of the mystery around the book. And as a consumer, as a reader, looking at your book on Amazon or on your website and going, am I going to like this? Is this going to help me? Or is this going to be the book I need? To hear you talk about your book and your passion and to connect with you as the author, it just erases any hurdle, any obstacle about buying the book, because now we all know and love you. And now we want to buy the book to support you. So do more episodes, do more podcasts.
Thank you so much.
You did such a great job. It was so great to have you.
Thanks so much, David. This has been a real honor and a great opportunity. I'm so glad that my first podcast was Canadian. So, hey, I don't think we did Canadian at all, did we?
No, we didn't. Hardly any. Do we have to throw that here at the end?
I'm going to go get a donut at Timmy's.
You have to say the word about instead of about. About.
Okay, I'm going to go shovel snow now.
Anyway, people think,
Canadian.
We're going to go shovel our snow. I love it. It's great.
All
Thanks,
right,
Jan, for being part of the
Bye.
podcast. Great to have you here. Cheers. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Hey, look, we're having such a great time talking to authors around the world. If you are an author and you would like to be on this very show, I would love to talk to you. livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com is the best way to get in touch with us. There you'll find our social media and blah, 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 la-di-da, and such. You, author, soon-to-be author, new author, currently writing your book author, published author, we need you here. The seat's empty, microphone set up, we're waiting for you. livingthenextchapter.com. We would love to have you on the podcast. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you should be here. See you at livingthenextchapter.com.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.